Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of The Secret of Scarlett Cove. We only have 2 chapters left. Today's chapter 6, and then one more tomorrow. So let's find out what happens. Chapter 6, The Attack. Tap, tap. Alex stirred when he heard the noise and then fell back asleep. Tap, tap, tap. His eyes opened. The room was still dark, with just a hint of dawn reflecting on the wall by the dresser. With a sigh, he snuggled back against the sheets and licked his lips. The pillow felt soft against his face, and he was having such an enjoyable dream. Pound, pound, pound! Both Alex and Mrs. Timmons sat straight up in their beds. What on earth was that? She gasped, clutching her chest. Alex threw back the covers and hurried to the window. Parting the curtains, he found himself staring at a smiling face crowned with short blonde hair and a baseball cap. He stumbled to the door and opened it. "Good morning," a cheery voice called out. "You guys up yet?" Mrs. Timmons blinked, trying to adjust the focus of her still in sleep mode eyes. "Who is it, Alex?" she called, her voice crackly and thin. The early morning visitor entered the room. "Hi, I'm Dusty," she said to Mrs. Timmons with a wave of her hand. Looking around, she added, Not bad. I like the painting of the seagulls above your bed." Then, turning to Alex, she asked, "You ready?" "Ready for what?" he responded, mid-yawn. "Ready for the most wonderful, the most beautiful, the most awesome boat ride of your entire life." Alex studied his companion, waiting for his sleepy brain to figure out what she just said. "Can I eat breakfast first?" he asked. "No way! The sun will be up in 20 minutes, and we have to hurry if we want to see it." "See what?" Dusty spread her arms in a gesture of frustration. "The sun coming up! What do you think? We're gonna watch the sun come up? Didn't I just say that? It's gorgeous out on Tom's Cove." Dusty moved her hands as if creating a beautiful image for her friend to imagine. The water, the sky, the sand on the shore. Who knows? We might even see a dolphin. Alex turned to his mother, who still sat clutching her chest. "Can I?" She nodded her head and then yawned. "Take an apple with you," she said, rubbing her nose with the back of her hand, "and a granola bar. Get some for Dusty, too. And there's some cut vegetables in the refrigerator." She fell back against her pillow and covered her head with the sheet. "Oh, and why don't you take some of those little milk cartons so you—" Steady, soft breathing replaced her mumbled words. "She's asleep," Alex whispered. "Poor Mom. She had a rough day yesterday." "Hurry up," Dusty breathed. "Give me 2 minutes. Make it 1. The sun doesn't wait for anybody." With that, Dusty tiptoed out of the veranda and sat down on one of the white plastic chairs fronting each room. Alex emerged just as Ranger Host trucks moved out of the parking lot on its way back to the refuge. "Let's go," Dusty said. The 2 adventurers clattered down the steps and hurried to their waiting bikes. Alex inhaled a deep breath of the cool pre-dawn air as he threw his leg over the center bar of his trusty 2-wheeler. "Smells like the ocean," he said with a grin. In 15 minutes, they were skidding to a stop at Doc Foster's, where Dusty's little fishing boat waited at the rickety dock. The 2 kids clambered aboard and slipped into their life vests. Dusty pulled on the starter rope and then pulled again. "Sometimes it's hard to get it going on cool mornings," she said. On the 6th yank, the engine rattled to life, and the 2 headed out into the channel. In a matter of minutes, they were rounding the bend and skimming out across the glassy surface of Tom's Cove. By now, the eastern sky was glowing brightly, but the sun had yet to make its appearance. Dusty slowed her craft until the engine was idling, pushing them gently over the smooth water. Then she hit the kill switch, and the motor fell silent. Reaching down between her feet, she picked up a small bucket filled with hardened cement and tossed it over the side. A nylon rope attached to the bucket unraveled from the bottom of the boat and then stopped as the makeshift anchor hit the silk-covered floor of the cove. With a happy sigh, Dusty settled herself by the silent motor and stared out toward the broad opening of the sea. She smiled and said, "My mom and I used to come here every Wednesday morning to watch the sunrise." "Wednesday? Why Wednesday?" "A lot of the shops in town are closed on Wednesdays because they're open on Sundays and people want a day off. Mom worked at a little gift shop by the theater on Main Street. She bought this boat with the money she earned selling her paintings. Didn't have to borrow from Dad or anything. Mom said it was just for her and me, so we can enjoy the sunrise on Wednesday mornings during the summer. Dusty looked around contentedly before letting her gaze return to the sea. I love it here, she said quietly. Sometimes it's like my mother never. Alex nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I know what you mean. The two sat without speaking a few minutes as the eastern sky continued to brighten. A seagull floated overhead and settled onto the cove some distance from the boat. What was she like? Alex asked. Dusty leaned back against the motor and adjusted her cap. She was pretty. She was kind of tall, soft brown hair. She said she didn't like her nose, but I thought it was okay. She was always telling stupid jokes that nobody laughed at but her. Well, I laughed because she always told them wrong. She'd start with the funny part and then try and tell you why it was funny. Her favorite color was blue. Mine too, Alex said with a smile. She had blue eyes. When she got sick, all her hair fell out. It bothered me to see her like that, so I just looked at her eyes and thought about how they were the color of the ocean right before the sun comes up. Kind of like that. Dusty pointed out to the east. Alex studied the rolling waves out beyond the calming curve of Ossateague Island's southern tip. He nodded slowly. It is beautiful, he whispered. Dusty turned toward Alex. Have you ever been so sad that it makes your chest hurt? Alex thought for a moment. No, I don't think so. Is that what happened to you after your mom died? Dusty nodded. That's why I come here every Wednesday morning. I sit out here in my mom's boat and think about the color of her eyes, and it makes my chest feel better. It's like she's here with me. We're listening to the seagulls, feeling the breeze on our faces, waiting for the sun to come up. Alex watched a series of perfectly spaced ripples roll past the gently bobbing boat. The preacher at my church says that dying is like going to sleep, and that someday God will wake up the people who believed in him. Did your mom believe in God? Dusty thought for a moment. She once said that whoever created this world must be very kind and loving because everything is so beautiful. She insisted that when we do something kind and loving, we're honoring that creator. That's kind of like believing in God, don't you think? Alex nodded. Yeah, it is. He sighed and frowned slightly. You know, I really love my mom and I don't know what I'd do if anything happened to her. Dusty smiled. I like her. I think she's nice, even when she's sleepy. Alex grinned. Last night we went on a date because stupid old Mr. Alex stopped speaking mid-word. Dusty frowned. Chilson? Were you about to say Chilson? Alex sighed. Yeah, he spent part of the day with her yesterday. That was her going with him when we drove past Fantasyland. She was going to swim with the dolphins. Dusty's eyes narrowed slightly. Going to? But she didn't. Why? Well, it seems she found a silly old piece of paper with a drawing of a dolphin on it and some writing that said, "Stay away from Fantasyland." She showed it to Mr. Chilson and suggested that maybe pinned up wild creatures wasn't a good idea. The guy went ballistic and stormed off, leaving her standing right there in her bathing suit. A smile crept across Dusty's face. Well, what do you know? Dad was right. Except your little protest paper got my mom dumped. I'm sorry about that, Dusty said quickly. Really, is your mom okay? Yeah, I took her out to eat at Captain Jonah's up on Maddox Boulevard. You know, that cool-looking place next to the bank with the big fishing boat out on the lawn? We had a great time. We ate like pigs. What kind of creep would dump my mom? She's like a perfect person who wouldn't hurt a flea and only wants good things to happen to you. Anyway, we had spaghetti and salad and a great big bowl of peppermint ice cream. Dusty nodded thoughtfully, and then brightened. Hey, speaking of eating, you gonna share your granola bars with me or what? Alex smiled and opened the paper bag he'd brought with him from the room. Help yourself, he said, tossing her a colorfully packaged treat. The two friends sat at opposite ends of the little fishing boat, contentedly chewing on their sweet granola bars as the sun, glowing brightly, rose majestically out of the sea and chased the last remnants of night from Tom's Cove. Ranger Host had just settled himself at his desk, ready to attack a pile of paperwork when his phone rang. Visitor Center, he said cheerily, speaking into the handset. Yes, this is Ranger Mike Host. Oh, hello, Mr. Chilson. How are you today? No, my daughter isn't here. May I help you? Well, I think she's out in her boat, probably wandering around Tom's Cove somewhere. She likes to... No, she hasn't said anything. Oh, well, I'm sure she wouldn't try to... Mr. Mr. Chilson, you sound upset. Is there something wrong? Hello? Hello? The ranger hung up the phone, concern darkening his face. Odd, he thought to himself. What would Brent Chilson want with Dusty? The guy sounded angry, and as if he'd been... Host grabbed the phone book that lay under the telephone and turned to the business section. Running his finger over the C's, he found a name and punched in the numbers. A friendly female voice answered. This is Mike Host out on the refuge, the ranger stated. Is Mr. Chilson in? He's not. Oh, he called in sick? But I just... A sudden chill ran down the ranger's back. Thanks, miss. I'll check back later. He hung up the handset and quickly picked it up again. Pressing number 3 on his speed dial, he waited as a series of electronic tones whirled in rapid succession. Lieutenant Reeve, please, he requested as soon as a voice came on the line. A moment later, he leaned forward and spoke slowly and urgently. Hello, Jake, this is Mike. Listen, I think we might have a problem. Dusty and Alex slowly rowed through the half-submerged marsh grasses edging the northern tip of Tom's Cove, looking for ducks and other wildlife. They'd seen several species of waterfowl swimming among the reeds and grasses as the sun continued to climb above the ocean. While they kept one eye open for ducks, terns, herons, and skimmers, they kept the other scanning the clear water nearby, trying to catch a glimpse of the telltale fin or flipper. Both hoped that maybe, just maybe, a dolphin or two had wandered into the cove and was hunting for food among the shallow lining the inlet or in the deeper water farther from the shore. Dusty and Alex were pushing along with the boat oars. Dusty had informed Alex that she couldn't run the motor in the grasses for fear of getting them tangled up in the propeller. He didn't mind. He liked the quiet solitude that accompanied their slow movement. Only the splash of their oars and the occasional call of waterfowl disturbed the morning stillness. From the island itself echoed a symphony of bird songs, creating a perfect backdrop for the quiet, reflective peacefulness of the marches. What do dolphins eat mostly? Alex asked. Mostly fish and squid, Dusty said as she scanned the grass. I read a book that they eat nearly 1/3 of their weight each day. That's a lot of sushi. Alex grinned. Well, I read that they can have up to 250 teeth. How'd you like to be a dolphin dentist? If one of those critters came to you with crooked teeth, the braces you put on would be so heavy they'd sink the poor dolphin to the bottom of the ocean. Dusty chuckled. Now that would be interesting. A dolphin with braces? The occupants of the little fishing boat laughed aloud as they tried to imagine such a strange sight. Unseen by the two kids, a high-powered speedboat moved slowly into the cove from Osateague Channel. Behind the wheel sat a frowning man about 35 years old, slender, with brown hair, wearing a blue jumpsuit. At his feet, rattling back and forth with the movement of his craft, was a small pile of crushed beer cans. His eyes, fighting to keep distant objects in focus, scanned the water, searching. His knuckles whitened and he tightened his grip on the steering wheel and throttle control. The thin bead of sweat that was running down his brow shimmered in the sunlight. Where are you? He asked in a whispered growl, his words slurred. I know you're out here. Where are you? He turned the wheel and watched as the bow of his sleek boat swung to the left and then to the right. Underfoot, he could feel the pulsing power of the vessel's inboard engine as it rumbled just above idle, waiting to respond instantly to commands from the cockpit. The driver wasn't interested in the birds flying overhead or the waterfowl swimming along the shore. He didn't hear the call of the Canadian geese or the low-pitched sound of the distant ocean. He found no pleasure in the sun warming his face or the breeze cooling his brow. He spent a sleepless night deciding, with the help of several six-packs of beer, that it was time for the harassment to end once and for all. He was going to teach that bratty, dusty host a lesson she'd never forget. All at once, he stiffened. There in the shallows fronting the island was the little fishing boat occupied by two people. He squinted. Yes, it was the host girl and the boy who'd been with her the other day when they'd met in the middle of the cove. A twisted smile spread across the man's face. 2 for the price of 1, he said with an evil chuckle. This is going to be fun. He pressed his back against the seat and shot his right hand forward, pushing the throttle lever as far as it would go. The powerful engine responded immediately, raising its voice to a muffled howl, lifting the vessel almost out of the water and then sending it racing across the placid surface of Tom's Cove. Dusty looked up from the grasses and frowned. Do you hear something? She asked. Alex glanced about. Hear what? Dusty gripped the edge of the boat with her free hand and slowly stood to her feet, eyes searching to the west. What she saw caused her to drop back down and throw her oar onto the floor. We gotta get out of here, she breathed. Alex saw her tilt the motor down, lowering the propeller into the grassy water, and then she grabbed the starter rope. What's going on? He asked. Dusty began pulling. We're about to have company, she called as she yanked again and again, trying to bring the motor to life. Alex looked to his right and saw what had drained the color from her face. A speedboat was racing across Tom's Cove, coming straight at them, its bow slicing through the water like a surgeon's scalpel slices through flesh. Hurry, he yelled, suddenly feeling vulnerable in the little craft. Hurry, Dusty! Dusty groaned as she repeatedly pulled on the rope. Engine's cold, she shouted. We haven't been running it for the past half hour. By now the moan of the approaching speedboat filled the air. Alex watched with its deepening terror, his heart pounding in his chest. Won't the grasses stop him? Dusty shook her head as she continued yanking wildly on the starter rope. His engine is too strong. He'll go through this march like the grass was made of butter. As the boat entered the marshy edge of the cove, Dusty and Alex heard their motor rattle to life. Dusty jammed the throttle to full power, which lifted the nose of their craft high into the air and propelled them forward. Alex heard her scream as she suddenly accelerated and sent her tumbling over the roaring engine and into the boiling water. At that moment, the speedboat flashed by, slicing across the spot where they'd been sitting just a second before, sending a tidal wave of spray and uprooted reeds crashing down around them. The fishing boat emerged from the hurricane of water and foam. Alex noticed that he was the only one in the boat. Dusty! He yelled, Dusty! A movement caught his eye. A single set of curled fingers clung to the back corner of the boat. He rushed to the rear of the boat, reached out, and grabbed the fingers just as they lost their grip. The sudden weight sent him sliding, and his chest slammed against the motor, turning it to one side, which caused the boat to swerve violently to the left. As it swept onto the clear water of the Clode in a wide arc, tossing a wall of spray high into the air, Alex fought to keep his grip on the slippery hand. He pulled the submerged girl against the force of the turn and of the crush of the fast-moving water washing over her. Then Dusty's other hand emerged from the swirling mist and grabbed onto Alex's straining arm. A face appeared, mouth open, gasping for air. Don't let go! Don't let go! He heard her scream. Both knew that just inches from her legs, a steel propeller spun under full power, just waiting to do her flesh what the speedboat's blades had done to the grasses in the march. The only thing keeping her from being sucked into their deadly circle was the powerful force of the water. With a mighty groan, Alex pulled Dusty up and over the rear of the boat, and together they fell, landing with a painful crunch on the vessel's wooden floor. Alex's head struck the seat, opening a wide gash just above his ear. Blood flowed down the side of his neck, instantly reddening his shirt with a dark, spreading stain. Struggling against the force of the turn, Dusty scrambled back toward the roaring engine. She pulled herself upright just in time to see the speedboat flash by again, traveling in the opposite direction, its wake slamming against her craft with a sickening, bone-jarring crash. She fought to remain at her post, jamming her foot under the anchor bucket lying on its side just in front of her seat. She tucked the steering handle of the engine under her arm and held it tightly. What's he doing? Alex screamed. He's going to kill us. Dusty turned the motor and sent them skimming out across the cove. He's crazy, she called, fighting back an almost overpowering urge to cry. He's totally gone crazy. Alex watched the speedboat turning in the distance, getting ready to begin another run in their direction. What are we going to do? He asked, eyes wide with fear. We can't outrun him. I know that, Dusty responded. We're going to have to find a place to hide, somewhere to get away from him. Where? Dusty looked around, her face pale, her hands trembling. Maybe if we can head up the channel toward the bridge where people can see us, he might go away. She swung the front of the boat toward the mouth of Osateague Channel. They skimmed across the surface of Tom's Cove, the speedboat maneuvering behind them like an angry dog waiting to pounce. Dusty knew that by staying close to the shore she'd protect their right side, and the water was shallower there, maybe too shallow for the bigger boat that was pursuing them. Sure enough, the two kids saw the speedboat hesitate, staying off to their left as they raced through the marshes, drawing ever closer to the bridge that spanned the two islands. They could see cars and bikers and hikers moving slowly over the arching structure headed for the refuge. Then their motor coughed and the boat jerked violently. Grass is getting wrapped up in the propeller, Dusty called, her hands trembling as she turned toward clearer water. 100 yards behind them, the speedboat in their wake, keeping them within striking distance at all time. There, Dusty shouted. Do you see that half-sunken boat, the one with the billboard on it? Alex scanned the channel and nodded. He remembered seeing it from the bridge. Some enterprising entrepreneur on Chincoteague had sunk an old derelict crabber in the water and mounted on it a billboard boasting the benefits of eating at Martha's Seafood Restaurant. We'll go over beside it, Dusty shouted, trying to be heard over the screaming motor and the wind whistling past their ears. Maybe it will give us some protection. Alex felt the fishing boat tilt as it burst from the marsh grasses and spread over the open water. He glanced in the direction of the speedboat and saw it rising higher as the driver brought his engine to full powder. He's going to try and ram us again, Alex screamed. Hurry, Dusty, hurry! Dusty gritted her teeth, trying to will a little more speed from her craft. Eyes locked on the approaching billboard, she glanced over her shoulder. The speedboat was approaching fast. Surely he'd stop the attack. Surely he'd see the people who were even now beginning to look down at the desperate scene below. Dusty steered her fishing boat around the outside of the sunken crabber and killed the engine, coming to a stop in the calm waters by the marshes lining the side of the channel. Then she and Alex waited. The only thing between them and the speedboat was a 15-foot wide sign resting atop the partially submerged crabbing boat. Suddenly, the sign exploded as the bow of a boat smashed through it. Alex and Dusty sat frozen in horror as the vessel that had been chasing them arched through the air and in the direction, surrounded by a shower of splintered wood. They jumped, one from the front and one from the back of the fishing boat just before the flying craft slammed down between them and splintered their boat into 1,000 pieces. The speedboat vanished under the bridge and continued northward, its wake shimmering in the morning sunlight. Then all was still. There was no sound, only the gentle wash of waves pushing slowly through the marsh. Pieces of the destroyed crabber bobbed in the water where just moments before a little fishing boat with 2 kids on board had floated. The hikers and bikers on the bridge stood motionless, mouths agape, unable to believe what they'd just seen. Then Alex burst to the surface, face upturned, gasping for breath. He made his way through the debris, groaning in pain as the salt water rushed over his head wound. Dusty! Dusty! He shouted, his words choked and strained. All he could see were floating timbers and shattered pieces of the whitewashed sign. Off to one side he'd noticed Dusty's life vest floating unoccupied amid the carnage. Below the surface of the debris-strewn channel, Dusty hovered submerged, arms outstretched, eyes closed. She didn't know where she was or how she'd gotten there. She just knew that she needed to leave, now. But how? Which way was up? Where was the air that her aching lungs burned to breathe? Suddenly she felt a bump, then another, and then the water around her seemed to be moving, washing over her faster and faster as if she was being lifted. All at once she was in full sunlight, gasping for air, water gushing from her mouth, and painful coughs and stomach-wrenching gags. Opening her eyes, she saw Alex swimming toward her and felt his arms encircle her, holding her above the water. She relaxed as the scene of peace filled her struggling mind. She was safe now. Alex held his friend tightly, treading water, waiting for someone to come along. Not far away, he saw a movement, a ripple on the face of the channel as something large moved just below the surface. At first, he wasn't exactly sure what it was. Maybe a fish, maybe a bobbing piece of debris. But the more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that neither had created the movement. What he'd seen wasn't a passing fish or a remnant of a destroyed billboard. No, the only thing could have caused that gentle break in the waves. A flipper. The sound of an approaching boat caught Alex full of attention. Had Chilton returned? No, this vessel was an inflatable craft, painted red with a black stripe and the words U.S. Coast Guard emblazoned on its side. At the wheel sat Lieutenant Reeve. Beside him, face pale and drawn, stood Ranger Host. When he saw Alex with Dusty held tightly in his arms, he sank onto his knees, tears streaming down his face. "We're okay," Alex called. "We're both okay." While eager hands reached down and pulled them on board, a red and white Coast Guard helicopter swept by above them and raced over the bridge, the pilot's eyes glued to a fast-moving speedboat in the distance, heading north. Wow, that was quite the chapter today. Come back tomorrow for Chapter 7 and the conclusion of The Secret of Scarlett Cove. Thanks for listening.